lucky enough to join the group last night for dinner, and I think I learned more in that 2 hours of conversation than I've learned in a long time. So that was really fun. It was great. I've been the DPW director for about a year now, just a little bit over a year, but my background is really transportation planning. So I've worked in the public and private sector, worked in Southern California, worked in Madison, Wisconsin, which is really a bicycle mecca. And then I came to Indianapolis, and I've been here, last night I was thinking about this, for 23 years. It's like, yikes, how does 23 years pass so fast? But started out at the MPO, and I have had the opportunity to work on some incredible projects. And my passion has always been multimodal connectivity. So biking, transit. One of the first things I worked on in Indianapolis, I was the project manager to determine how to use the Monon Rail Corridor. And as you know, that turned into the Monon Rail Trail, which is pretty much the cornerstone of our greenway system. As part of that process, we also talked about the Nickel Plate Line, the Northeast Corridor. And so, you all know where that went. In terms of transit, it's become one of our main transit lines into the city. So, or hopefully will become one of our main transit lines into the city. So it's been an interesting journey and one that I've really enjoyed. I want to make sure that we thank our sponsors, Transpo Industries, thanks for being here, Crawford, Murphy and Tilley, American Structure Point, and then also BGI. They provided the bikes for our guests to use last night. And are you guys going to bike down the Madison today? Or?
We are if the weather's going to hold out.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that. So just a few highlights about what's happened in Indianapolis since Mayor Ballard has come into office. And most of you know this, but I'm not sure you all know. So Mayor Ballard came into office in January of 2008, and really since that time we've gone from 0 to 75 miles of bike lanes, which has been just incredible. His goal is to have 200 miles of on-street bike lanes by 2015. We've really expanded the greenway system. We work really closely with John Williams and Don in doing all of that. And we've adopted an award-winning complete streets policy. So we're all very proud of that, and we worked closely with our city county council to do that. And Andy was instrumental, and Jameson, in helping on that. So really, we have a huge focus on connectivity, and the mayor, has really led that effort. It was interesting because the cultural trail had started before Mayor Ballard came into office, and it was when that transition happened, there was a little bit of concern. Not much of the trail was done. Will he embrace it? Will he not? And I mean, he embraced it and took it further. So that's been incredible. And as you know, we're going to be getting down on it on Saturday because the grand opening is this weekend. Mayor Ballard was instrumental in creating the bike hub, and I assume you guys have seen that already. So that's been a huge success. Bottom line, Mayor Ballard understands that biking connectivity is a huge livability issue, and he really believes it's crucial to attracting and retaining the best and the brightest here in Indianapolis, and that's really going to be important going forward. So as we do move forward, we're really interested in doing more with Cycletracks, and so I know you guys are going to be talking a lot about that. Our data shows that people really want those types of facilities, so looking forward to that. It's important to us that we keep Indianapolis's bikeway facilities specific to Indianapolis. We want to make sure we meet our needs. We want to take best practices from other places, but I think every area is unique, and so we want to make sure we retain our uniqueness. And obviously, we're using the NACDO design guide, as a lead in that. So we're just really thankful that you're here. Appreciate you sharing the expertise, and looking forward to a great day of learning. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Again, I'm David Baker-Rockowitz. I'm with NACDO, National Association of City Transportation Officials. I just want to give you all a little bit of an overview of what this event is about, where we've been before, and sort of what the results that we've seen in other places are. So NACDO, for anyone who isn't familiar with the organization, is basically a peer-to-peer network of 15 of the largest cities in the U.S. and 9 affiliate member cities of small and mid-sized communities that really is centered around the idea of sharing best practices, of sort of by coming together, we can sort of share what we've done and accelerate innovation in cities across the U.S. And Cities for Cycling is one of our projects. Designing Cities, which is our most recent project and something I'll discuss just a little bit later in the presentation, is sort of our most recent effort. I did want to point out, yesterday we went out with Jameson.
Karen sent her that. I did not plan that.
So Jameson took us out for a ride yesterday, and I think that I can say that we all learned something, even though in some ways we're here to sort of share best practices. And so this roadshow is unique and slightly different from somewhere like Memphis or Atlanta, where we're really going in and there's nothing on the ground, in that it's kind of centered around, well, what comes next? And I think that being here at the ribbon cutting of the Cultural Trail is an opportunity at a pivotal moment in the city's sort of bike program and history to sort of ask, how do you build on the success that Indianapolis has already achieved? And in terms of the road shows that we've done, I think that that's something that we've been really successful at doing. This is Nicole in Atlanta last year. This is our 7th road show. As you can see, some of the cities up here, like Chicago, like Boston, are now really considered leaders in sort of the American cycling renaissance of the past 5 years. And one of the things that we've tried to do with the road shows is come in and to engage city leaders, engage top policymakers, do trainings with engineers to get them to feel a lot more comfortable with the kinds of facilities that you'd find in the Natural Likely Design Guide, to talk about sort of key messaging, and to sort of understand how cycling fits not only into a city's transportation program, but its sort of overall goals in terms of livability, economic development, and talent attraction. I think one of the amazing things that we've been able to see when we've come in and done road shows is real projects going in on the ground, sometimes less than a year after we've come in. This is a facility, a two-way cycle track in Chicago that I think went in the winter after we were in the city. In Atlanta, Nicole and I actually stood, I don't know if she remembers this, but we stood in this exact spot, and within about 6 months, they had put down a buffered bike lane, in this case, on one of their major, I think it was a 6-lane street in their city. So the goal for this event is really to go out, see some real sites, some real projects, and help you guys realize projects that are going to be game-changing in the city. And obviously building upon a project that has wowed all of us to begin with. Another key thing that we're going to be talking about this afternoon is the Urban Bikeway Design Guide. The origins of the Urban Bikeway Design Guide are really sort of coming out of the frustration of cities that really wanted this, but had design guidance that only allowed them to get this. And I think that the NACDA Urban Bikeway Design Guide has been an incredible resource in that it sort of gives engineers, but also leaders and policymakers, a very clear vision of what they want their streets to look like, using a kind of interactive and dynamic format to communicate those ideas. And if you haven't seen it, I did bring a copy for everybody to browse through. In fall 2011, Secretary LaHood, following a kind of nationwide endorsement campaign, an outreach campaign, officially endorsed the guide. We also received endorsements from cities all around the country that really, I think, points to the level of sort of the importance of cities sort of coming together to innovate and sort of move this particular movement forward. One of the amazing things, about 9 months after we came out with the guide, we found that projects were on the ground all around the country: Atlanta, Austin, I believe that's Long Beach, and Lexington, Kentucky. So, this is a nationwide movement. This is something that is really completely changing the way that we think about and design our streets. But it's not just bikes. And I think that as an organization, NACDO has in some ways sort of been able to contextualize the city's recycling project within a much larger set of goals. This is Mayor Bloomberg speaking at our Designing Cities conference, which happened last fall, which touched on everything from parking management to food trucks to green infrastructure. And the sort of crystallization of all of this is this fall we're going to be coming out with a design guide called the Urban Street Design Guide, sort of based on 5 key principles, or 4 key principles. And this is something that I think we're going to talk a lot about today. One is that you can act now, that you can sort of outline the future of streets using low-cost materials and being sort of tactical in the short term. It's great when you can have an amazing facility like the Cultural Trail, but we're in times where departments are strapped for cash and have to learn to be flexible, see their streets as malleable entities that they can improve over a 5-year time frame, but realize benefits in the short term. The other principle, streets are public spaces. I think it's a fundamental shift in the way that cities around the country are seeing themselves. It's basically redefining public works and transportation and toward livability, towards public space. Designing for safety. This is something where everybody's going to talk about. It involves data collection. It involves seeing safety in a fundamentally different way, not just conflict reduction, but sort of managing shared space. And great streets are great for business. And that is a huge point. The economic development imperative about how we think about streetscapes, about how we think about projects like the Cultural Trail and the projects that are going in around the country is incredible. And I think that this is something I talked a little bit about at dinner last night, sort of the idea that traffic engineering, street design, for years has been sort of focused on problem solving. And I think that the change right now is about thinking about street design as finding opportunities and reinvesting in our streets as public spaces. As you can see here, this is Union Square in New York City. All of this is going to be going into an urban street design guide, which is based on basically sort of creating a new set of standards for city streets, including public plazas, incorporating bike lanes, BRT, light rail, and sort of taking the best projects from around the country and making those a sort of new standard for how we design and program our streets. Also, we're going to be embracing some new concepts that haven't necessarily are still sort of in the early stages of development, and only seen in a few places around the country. And some of the sort of tactical developments. This is a parklet in New York City. Parklets are something that I think, even while we're focused on bikes today, it fits into a sort of entire movement of thinking about how we can flexibly program our streets and reuse the curb, reuse streets as public space. Again, thank you to our sponsors, and I encourage everybody to really learn from our 3 presenters today. They've all been incredibly influential in their cities, and I encourage you to sort of pick their brains after we're done here. Thank you.
So I'm Nicole Friedman. I'm the Director of Bike Programs for the City of Boston. And I always say interrupt anytime. It can be very awkward for me to be up here talking to myself all day, so please interrupt. But many of you, what I'll talk about is sort of Boston and where we've come from and where we're going. But for those of you that don't know, we were an award-winning bike city. We have been 3 times rated worst cycling city in the country by Bicycling Magazine. We had an international award, worst cycling city in the world, and they gave it to us early because there was no one competitive with us. And we had 180 feet of bike lane. This is back in 2008. And I had to change it. I used to say we had no miles of bike lane, and then, an advocate raised their hand. But it started there and ended here. So, but September 21st, 2007, this is a day you guys don't know from history. Mayor Menino did a press announcement, and he said we're going to transform Boston into a world-class bicycling city. And then he points to me and says, Nicole, deal with the details. And I realized at the time our goal, what it is ultimately changing culture. And I always joke, this is, well, this wasn't a real slide, but I did have a training partner when I was bike racing who we'd go ride 5 hours and she'd get home and she'd always be late to pick up her kids, so this is how she did walk her dog. So anyway, when we say change culture, what does it mean and what is our ultimate goal? And I use my family as a great example. So in the top left, that's me. I was a bike racer for 13 years. I would bike on the highway, it wouldn't bother me. A bike program is not about people like myself. It's not also about people like my dad. I got him a bike for his 60th birthday, and a couple months later I handed it back to him and he said, "Nicole, sell that thing. I'm never going to ride it." It is about my mom. She lives in the suburbs. In the summer, she'll ride a couple days a week. She'll go get ice cream, run a couple errands, and it's safe out in the suburbs. And it's people like my nephew, although we did buy him a bike for his 6th birthday and he handed it back and said, "Nicole, it's broken." I was like, "What do you mean it's broken?" And he looks at me, he's like, "Well, it needs a new battery." That was disappointing. So then the question is, well, where do you start with the bike program? How do you go from nothing to transforming the city? Number one thing we did was set a goal. And the first thing we did was have a summit. We brought in some leaders from around the country. Andy Clark, head of the League of American Bicyclists, was there. And I said, "Andy, here's our goal. In 3 years, we're going to become a bronze-level bike-friendly city." And he looked at me and he said, he didn't think it was possible. So we came up with some guiding principles. I think the most important was just start already. From where we were, there were so many low-hanging fruit, and it was so obvious. And we heard a lot from advocates and planners that, well, we need to create a master plan and get a master plan. And I said, yes, and there's so much that we know that's obvious. We can put in bike racks, put in bike lanes, put in signage. We don't need to wait for a master plan, and we can't. We need to build credibility. And then we had to focus. Again, there's so many projects. I had someone call me up and said, "You got to put bike clips on the bike paths." And I said, "That is a great idea, but not now. We're going to do it later." And then the goal, I think, is most important is plagiarize. And here I quote myself, "If I never have an original idea, we can be wildly successful." But we were very fortunate. There were so many cities that had come before us and had done a great job. We could learn from them, learn from their best practices. And to this day, we've done nothing original. And I'm proud of that. So we set up a program the standard way all cities do around the 5 E's. And all of the 5 E's are important to a true bike program. Engineering, that's putting in the lanes, putting the racks, the cycle tracks. It matters. But we also have to have encouragement programs, that's events, things that will encourage people to get on a bike. Education of cyclists and drivers, evaluation, seeing what's working, what's not, enforcement programs. And in Boston, we created a 6th E, equity. Boston is a minority-majority city. The program really, we want it to be about everyone in the city. Doesn't matter what ethnicity, or where people are from, what their income is. This program is about everybody. So one thing we knew is the engineering piece is critical. All the 5 E's matter, the engineering really matters. We did a survey of a few thousand cyclists, and I don't know if this was a good thing or not. I had a write-in question where people could freelance the answers. 72.9% said the principal change that would increase their riding was essentially road improvements, adding paths, adding lanes, fixing potholes. Why I say it was a write-in is we didn't lead them to this answer. This is what they came up. I was hating myself while I was analyzing it, but glad I did it that way. So what have we done? We added 60 miles of bike lane. This is a city, everyone talks about how the roads are narrow, they're twisty, but we have found 60 miles. We started with the low-hanging fruit. Basic bike lanes, where there's enough space on the road to put in a bike lane of 5 feet and not remove parking and not remove a travel lane. And we did use share road. One thing we did right from the beginning with the shared road markings is we tried never to use them if they weren't really part of a bike lane, so it could be interrupted by a bike lane. We didn't want to set a precedence for our engineers that says, oh, don't do any hard work, just slap down a shared lane marking. So for the most part, you have a bike lane, and if you just couldn't get through a certain block or quarter mile, we'd add sharrows. Now we might use sharrows a little more liberally because we've set a good precedent. And And then we said there's a lot more we can do with low-hanging fruit. So we call this low-hanging fruit plus. Other things that we can do that are still very easy that can really improve a bike lane. And one is just adding green color. So at critical intersections, at high conflict intersections, we add the lines through the intersection in green paint, and it highlights where the cyclist is. If we have a little extra space, we'll give it to the cyclist. So we'll have a wider bike lane. 5 feet is the minimum, 4 feet against the curve actually, but you can get up to 6 feet, you can do 6.5, you can do 7, and you can put a buffer. This one does have the hatch marks, you just can't see it. The other thing we did also in the low-hanging fruit was address train tracks. We identified a number of hot spots on train track crossings, and again, we added the white lines across it, guiding the cyclists over it, and again, we added green paint often, just to say this is where you should go, and we get the cars to obey. Anything to get people crossing at the correct angle of these tracks. We did do a bus bike lane that we already had the bus lane, so we added bikes to it. And still in the low-hanging fruit, Commonwealth Avenue, one of our most historic roads in the city. It's actually part of the only place where we have a grid in the city. And we sort of pulled together a lot of the best practices that we can come up with. So Commonwealth Avenue has this park mall right in the center. And we looked at it and we said, why don't we put the bike lane on the left side? It's a one-way street against the mall. And that way the cyclists don't have to worry about car doors. It's a prettier ride because they're against the park. There's a lot of double parking on this road. So in this case, we said, well, let the double parking affect the drivers. The cyclists don't drive, they're not double parking. They get a free ride past it. It also worked better on the transitions. On the left side, we could have the cyclists going underneath an underpass, which is much safer. The road on top, Mass Ave, has the #1 highest crash rate for cyclists in the city, and they got to avoid it. And then, of course, we added some bike boxes. And to this day, we've really mostly picked off low-hanging fruit. We haven't done any significant cycle tracks yet. Mass Ave, which we installed last year, is what I would call our transition. This is, again, the road that had the highest accident rate in the city. It's also 50,000 ADT, a major route, and also a major business corridor. And we said we really need cyclists we need to fix this for cyclists because not only are they getting injured, they are getting killed, and they will get killed again. And in order to get a bike lane here, we had to remove 70 parking spots, is about 50% of all the parking spots. And we worked for about 6 months with the businesses to address loading zone issues, any parking issue. And ultimately, the argument was very easy. We said, look, how are you going to value the price of a cyclist's life against your parking spot? And really, no one could argue against that.
What's been the post-implementation feedback?
We've gotten no complaints from businesses. It's shocking. I mean, one was threatening left and right, silence. And the truth is, no one could park there anyway because people are just parking illegally. And the meters are for 2 or 3 hours anyway, which is a shame. So any business on Mass Ave that was relying on people parking was going to go out of business because you have probably 10 times more pedestrians than drivers anyway. So what have we learned and what do we know and what's the next step? And this is interesting because in many ways you've already taken the next step. But we know that #1 reason people don't ride is fear of motor vehicles. And in New York City, over 50% of the population wants to bike as long as they live within 10 miles, but they don't because they're scared. We also looked at, we did a study. As one of my favorite survey questions, we just showed photos, and I had about 15 different photos, and people would click through them. And there were different scenarios, and there were no words. And we asked, how do you feel about riding in each of these conditions? And of course, they were quoted on the back end. And what we found is, and I really should change the scale of this so it's more obvious, but the more protection you get and the more separation the cyclist has, the more comfortable they feel and the more likely they're to fall. And what was interesting, we hear a lot in Boston about the vehicular cyclists. Now, the vehicular cyclists want to be on the road. But what we found is actually, even the advanced riders, the quote vehicular cyclists, they prefer the protection and separation too. So it's a very small minority that are saying that, but what people say and what they do are very different. So what's the solution? It's obviously Cycletracks. This is the on-street variety that New York City, a lot of the big older cities are doing. And obviously it's just using the cars as a buffer. So instead of having sidewalk, parked car, bike lane, and travel lane, where you've got your cyclist sandwiched between the parked car and the bike lane, you've got the cyclist protected by the parked car from the moving vehicle. It's very powerful. A situation like this, an on-street one where you're really just using paint, about 100,000 a mile. When you get to an off-street cycle track like Europe, what you guys have essentially, you're looking at more like $1 million plus per mile. I actually think what you have with your trail is probably the wave of the future because it's much more beautiful than this is. But this is, in my mind, a long-term intermediary step until roads can be constructed. And they can look very different. Some cities use colors, some don't. You'll see in my photos, there's often the same people in the background milling around, those who I was biking with. Next thing we're doing as part of the bike lanes is our network plan. We started before the network plan was done. It's done now. But everything we've done will fit right into the network plan. And ultimately, we'll have a good third of our facilities will be protected, multi-use path or off-street path and protected bike facilities. Next, intervention bike parking. We used the standard bike rack. And I think bike racks are fascinating. These companies make bike racks, and so many of them just can't get one that functions. But basically, 2 points of contact for the bike. That's the most important thing. And solid into the ground. We chose this rack because it blends in with the background in Boston and the historic nature. And 1 point of contact into the ground is half the time of installation. We did a test. We tried on-street bike parking that other cities have done. And usually pilot means, when you pilot something, it means we're just doing this and we're going to call it a pilot to get it in. This is an actual pilot that I would say failed. So I put this in, and I get a call the next day from a truck that's trying to get past there. Said, you can't make the turn. So we go back out and we push the rack about and foot back this way, and then we get a call from someone here that says we can't reach the handicap ramp. So then we push it back half the distance there, and we get a call the next day from the truckers that can't get there. So I went out and I unscrewed all the bolts, and I told them to just nudge it if they need to move it. That rack was actually last seen floating down the highway, so that didn't work out so well. We've now switched to a much smarter system. This is working great. This is what Portland's done in other cities. This is an on-street rack. And I think most of our failures actually are around bike racks. A lot of cities are doing artistic racks. I want to point out I had nothing to do with the design of this rack, and I really didn't like it. It has some of the great features it has are very sharp edges so you can cut yourself. And if you decide to lock to the end, your bike will be stolen in a millisecond. So I looked up online for another presentation I was doing, World's Ugliest Bike Racks, and this actually popped up. So it's important to learn from your mistakes. We've now made some better ones, and these have gone in, and we definitely want to continue. Third element is on the encouragement events. We have the mayor's citywide bike ride every September, gets about 5,000 riders. We're actually looking at closing a major interstate over what's called the Zakin Bridge for this year. If we get that, the ridership will go up. We have a professional bike race, TD Bank Mayor's Cup, right downtown, and we have a pretty big event every single month. The reason we do it, I did in a survey, I was trying to get at the triggers, what gets people to bike. You know, everyone talks about it, but at one point, the day before they ride, what was it that got them on their bike? And 10% of them come because of events. Sorry, that's our bike race. So, and then we get into the whole safety issue, and I've been told that I am not a good person to talk about safety because my personal habits and my professional ones are very different. But we did have a couple of fatalities a few years ago. We convened a safety summit with the commissioners from all of the relevant departments. We had EMS, police commissioner, transportation commissioner. We had the head of our MBTA public transit. We had the state secretary of transportation. Out of it, we got 43 suggestions from the public. All we did was listen. And we actually implemented every one of those suggestions. Some of them included professional training. This is not Boston, by the way. This is Cambridge. Working with MBTA, working with the police to increase their knowledge of cycling issues. We trained all of the bus drivers. We've done enforcement. I don't know if it's making a difference, and we need to figure that out. And right now we're working on a crash report. We had actually a really terrible year of fatalities. We had 5 fatalities in 1 year, which is more than we've had in a decade combined. So we've called together all of the police and EMS data, and we're publishing a report next week. So the parts that I'm most excited about myself is the equity piece. With stimulus money, I was filling out this grant, and it was really great. Words were flowing off my pen on how we were going to, bring in all low-income residents into the city and donate thousands of bikes. And unfortunately, we got the grant, and I thought to myself, oh my God, I have to do this. So I hired someone smarter than me, and that was a great strategy. We started a Roll It Forward program. We collect, refurbish, and distribute bikes to low-income residents in Boston for free. And in 2.5 years, we've done 1,800 bicycles. We have a giant warehouse, and it's like a factory. We also started a youth cycling program, and we said, okay, how do we marry taking a program to scale with the impact? Because I saw a lot of programs where you put all the kids in a gym, and you talk for an hour about wearing a helmet. I said, that's not going to have any impact. We wanted to find that sweet spot. So we modeled a program after Copenhagen, where each kid gets 4 classes all on the bike. And our goal is to teach safe riding skills, give them the ability to ride safely, and have them fall in love with cycling. So since then, we've had over 12,000 youth going through the program, and all of them get 4 to 8 hours of on-the-bike training. A lot of them then get the bike in the end, which is combined with our other program. And then lastly, bike share. As many of you know, Boston does have the New Balance Hubway Bike Share program. We launched it July 28th, 2011. You'll notice some of these dates are burned into my brain. It's because I finally got to sleep after them. We've had 675,000 trips. We've had a total of 10,000 members. We're probably at 7,000 right now. It rolls as people, when they expire their terms. We have 72 stations in Boston. We're going to get to 92 stations. And ours is a regional system, so we brought in the 3 neighboring communities, Boston, Cambridge, Brookline, Somerville, because if you are a student in the city, you don't even know what's Boston and what's not, and you don't understand the difference. And of course, for us, again, subsidized memberships was deeply important. We said we committed to distributing 500 subsidized memberships in our first year to low-income residents. We sell them for $5. After a month, we had sold 20 of them. And so I hired a project manager, and I said, I don't actually care how long this takes you or how much time you put into this. Get it done. And if you get a no, go somewhere else, and go somewhere else, and go somewhere else. And she basically went to community and social service center, one after another, and gave presentations and signed people up. So this is actually the zone. When we launched, we actually got right along the river. The other side of the river is Cambridge Woodline, or Cambridge and Somerville. So we made it easy for them to launch their own system. And as we expand, we're going farther south into more and more neighborhoods. The system that we have in Boston technically is self-sufficient financially. As we grow, it will be less financially self-sufficient, and that's okay. To us, this is transportation. It's a public service. The question we get all the time is, what are you doing about helmets? And we, for the mayor, helmets is very important. We had a 2-tier strategy. Part 1, we signed up all the CVS's and the Walgreens. They're about as common as every Starbucks is, to sell bike helmets. And they're selling them at about $7.50, the price we get them. Which, when you think about it, here we are in dense city, space is a premium, no one's making money off of this, and helmets are big, and they're stocking them. We also sell helmets online when you buy a registration for $18. But for us, it was how do you capture the casual user, the one-day user? And the key is accessibility and low cost. But that wasn't good enough. I think only 30% of bike share users were using the helmets, because even walking across the street to the CVS is not good enough. So a professor from MIT called me up about a year ago and said, well, we've got these seniors in this mechanical engineering class, and do you have a project that they could potentially work on? And I think he was thinking like build some sort of trinket or something for a bike. And I said, well, come to think of it, I do. If you wouldn't mind having them build a third-generation automated helmet vending machine that can, with a swipe of a card, distribute a helmet, take it back as a rental, clean the helmet. And by the way, you've got no footprint whatsoever for this, so build it into that frame. 3 months later, I'm in an auditorium watching this be presented. It's on the front page of the Globe. We actually just did a bid for a helmet vending machine, and they actually won the bid. So I am negotiating a contract with a 23-year-old. And I'm trying to act serious about this. I brought a lot of statistics on bike share. I'm going to skip them now, but if you have questions, they're in the presentation. So I don't want you to think I'm avoiding them. So ultimately, we have found success. We did hit our goal. We are a bike-friendly community at the silver level. I think Andy may have had a heart attack from the League of American Bicyclists. We've seen an 83% increase in ridership, and that slide might not be statistically significant, which is why I'm showing it very quickly. And our ranking has gone up to, I've actually seen as high as second for Boston as a bike-friendly city. That one was alphabetical. And most importantly, Bicycling Magazine swallowed some pride and called us a future best city. So thank you. And none of you interrupted, just one of you, but that's okay. Unless you have questions, I will hand it off to whoever is next.
Is the bike sharing terminal, or is it a nonprofit?
You know what? There's a bunch of different models. We have a for-profit. We have Alta Bike Share as the operator and public bike system. I think the key to success is finding the best team to operate nonprofit or for-profit, and I guarantee you have the best team.
Nicole, I did have a question.
Yes.
What's the budget of your Boston Bikes program? The overall budget, and then the community outreach. What's the budget?
It's a fraction of what I would like it to be. The infrastructure, the bike lanes, it's about $1 million a year between design and installation. And then the program side, we get $150,000 a year from the city. That's for everything we do. And then it's supplemented here and there with some grants. So we're ridiculously efficient with money.
So all the rest, outside of the infrastructure, it's $150,000 to do all the other
Maybe
things.
225 when you throw in grants.
Okay.
Thanks. Next to nothing.
I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Portland and our history. It's interesting. In thinking about it, listening to Paul, I'm not sure whether we're the rabbit or the hare. We have been at this longer than most other cities in the U.S., and so we got out in front first. And it feels like right now other cities are catching up with us, and I think they may pass us before too long. But I do think Portland has a lot of great resources in our community. We have a lot of people who are very passionate about cycling. We have strong advocacy. We've had strong political leadership. We have a great awareness of land use and transportation in a planning context and regional government. So we do have a lot going for us. Where we have I think we have some challenges that are not unfamiliar. Funding is a major challenge for us. We like in our conversation last time we were talking about infrastructure needs. It sounds like the numbers were almost identical between Indianapolis and Portland, looking at our overall infrastructure backlog needs and our unmet paving needs. So we're struggling with those same kind of balances that other cities are. It's like, well, how much do we invest in these, what I call the forward-looking initiatives, where we're trying to adapt our cities and make them better for the kind of future that we envision for our residents. And at the same time, we have these liabilities that we really have to take care of. We still have to fix potholes. We still have to take care of this infrastructure. And we have to do a good enough job of doing that our public retains, we retain public confidence and are able to, as move forward. So I'll tell you a little bit about our story and how we've done it, and some of the things that you may be able to learn from Portland in that process. So, like Nicole said, we have a goal. We recently updated our bike plan. We had one from 1996, and we felt that even though we had made a lot of progress with that plan, we needed to update it. We had a much more ambitious goal for the future. And so one of the things we understood is that we want cycling to be one of the main pillars of our transportation system. Basically, the way I talk about it, I look at active transportation, cycling and walking, as being approximately 1/3 of our mode split in the future. Think of it as a three-legged stool. Maybe the proportions aren't necessarily equal, but you need motorized transport, you need transit, and you need active transportation. All three of those systems, I think, are vital to having active, healthy cities. So our goal is to have 25% of bike mode split by the year 2030 in Portland. I don't know if technically that's achievable. I think it's a reasonable goal when you look at bicycle-friendly cities around the world. Portland, what we're trying to do right now is see ourselves in an international context in terms of best practices and what we're striving for. So, there's challenges there with density and the length of the trips and whether you can. So a lot of whether you can achieve that won't just depend solely on bicycling infrastructure, but it'll also depend on the land use context and whether we bring residents into the city and achieve the kind of density that we would aspire to. So I started with the city in 1986 as a traffic engineer. And in the 1980s, our system, I don't know whether we were necessarily as hostile as Boston maybe was for a cycling environment, but we had very little bicycle infrastructure. By 1990, we had a little bit. At about this time, 1991, I became a manager in transportation there. I was, again, still as a traffic engineer, but basically I was able to take over the bicycle program about that time in the early 90s, hired a new bike program coordinator, Mia Burke, who's now a principal with Alta Planning Design and Alta Bike Share. And in the 1990s, we went great guns. We did a bike plan then. Mia was a very dynamic leader for us in terms of outreach and pushing the envelope at that time. We had good political support. Earl Blumenauer, who you saw in one of the earlier slides there standing next to Ray LaHood, was our transportation commissioner at the time. He's now a congressman for Oregon. And we were able to build a lot of our basic network at that time, which basically involved bike lane facilities and what we refer to as bike boulevards, and more recently as neighborhood greenways. So we've continued to expand that network over time up to about the current time. And what we found is that as we built the network and put more miles of facilities out there, that we've gotten ridership that basically paralleled that growth in terms of growth rates. This slide, I believe, is, sorry for the little dark background there, you can't see it too well, but this, I think the date on this was 2008. So there's our accomplishment in terms of bikeway miles and our estimate of daily trips. That's across our bridges in Portland, which is kind of what we use as our surrogate for bike growth. And what we've seen is since 2008, that growth has flattened out a little bit. I think that as our building the network has flattened out, so has some of that growth. But we are seeing some pretty high mode splits in some of our inner neighborhoods. About 24% of the census tracts in Portland have a bike mode split for the primary commute trip of 13%. So that's pretty good. And what you see with that is you see cyclists. I mean, when you get to about 5% mode split, you really start to notice cyclists as a part of the mix out there. So when you get to 13%, people aren't really questioning anymore whether bikes are a part of the transportation system or not. So that debate is kind of over in Portland. Now it's more about, well, how do we best accommodate them? How do we make this safe and comfortable, et cetera? So this sort of typology of cyclists has been very popular, and it's something that our current bike coordinator, Roger Geller, basically developed and popularized. And we've been we work quite a bit with researchers at Portland State University, Jennifer Dill and Chris Monsieur, professors there in particular. And Jennifer Dill has been actually doing some research based on a funded grant that she has to basically put some numbers to this, because this was basically our estimate based on some very limited research of what the breakdown would be between the types of cyclists. At the left end of the graph there, you have what we call the strong and the fearless. So that was Nicole in her bike racing days. And then the next group, quite a bit bigger, but is the enthused and confident. And those were really the folks that we probably first attracted in Portland when we started building a network, creating the connectivity, putting bike lanes out there. These are folks that they want to ride, and if you give them decent facilities and allow them to get where they want to go, they will. The next group is sort of the group that we're most interested in, and that's the interested and concerned. And I'll come back to them, but I think you know who these folks are. And this is, some of this is attitudinal, but also some of it is limitations. So there's some people that don't have the physical ability to ride, and cycling isn't going to work for them. So in sort of a targeted marketing concept, those aren't the people you go after, because your efforts will be wasted on them. But if you're trying to grow market share, you want to go after these folks who are in this category, what we call the interested but concerned. Given the right kind of incentives and conditions, these folks will enter the market. They'll start to move over and be a part of that interested and concerned, but enthused but confident category. So part of my testimonial, I'm going to grab my water here. In 2008, I got to go on a study trip with our a group from our regional government as a part of they had put together a blue ribbon committee, and they were actually studying how to, they were interested in really building out a regional trail system. And so they put together a blue ribbon committee of influential stakeholders, and we're trying to put together a plan and a funding scheme. As a part of that, we got to go on a tour to Amsterdam and Copenhagen. And I had not been in bicycle-friendly cities in Europe or anywhere in the world, for that matter, of the scale that Amsterdam and Copenhagen are. And this picture is one that has become one of my favorites that I took on this trip. It's in Copenhagen, and it's along one of their green corridors, which was a former rail line that's central to their city. And Copenhagen, if you've never been there, they have the quality of their bike facilities is very good. They have a lot of separated facilities. They have Cycletracks with a lot of cyclists in them that are quite comfortable to use. All their intersections, I would say, are well designed and treated well. And they have actually been investing more recently in this part of their system, which are these greenways where you're totally separated from vehicles that are oftentimes winding through residential areas and parks. And so what you see here, this gentleman here, he's got this wonderful this bike that's really built for his children. There's plexiglass in the front of this so the kids can actually see right out and see where they're going. He stopped and he's chatting with a friend of his here, and I didn't even notice it at the time, but I capture in the background there's a woman cycling with her her daughter on the back, and she's talking on her cell phone. So this is a typical, this is what you would typically see in Copenhagen. So cycling is a part of everyday life. It's a part of family life. Obviously, these folks feel comfortable in this environment. And so the questions about, can you get where you want to go? Is it comfortable, safe, etc.? They've answered those questions, and they're reaching this kind of target market that we want to reach. So when I returned from Copenhagen in 2008, and we were starting to try to incorporate some of the things that we'd seen there. So we said, well, how do we translate this to Portland? How do we translate this to a North American concept? And Mia Burke and I went up to Tacoma, Washington, and we were doing a workshop with folks very similar to this, and spent a day up there. And after that, we were driving back, and I was like, part of the problem is we didn't have this at that time. We didn't have any guidance that translated this into North American context for us. And what we had was really guidance that came from the Federal Highway Administration and the American Association of State Highway Officials. And as I started to think about this, I was like, it totally makes sense. The Federal Highway Administration basically, their leadership and their initiatives came around building a connected network of freeways across the country. And that's what, that's what their legacy is, really, and that's where the expertise of that organization developed around. And then the state highway officials, they're responsible for state highways, and which is largely managing freeways, maintaining freeways, and taking care of highways that connect cities throughout a state. But neither of those organizations have a legacy or particular expertise in urban transportation. And really cities, people like us, we do urban transportation. And when you talk about active transportation, bike and ped, that's really at the bottom of the list for AASHTO and FHWA. One, they haven't gained any experience by dealing with it, and it's never been one of their primary responsibilities or highest priorities. So we need to kind of flip this around and realize that really we're the leadership group around how do we design for active transportation in cities. We're the people that are going to make the difference, and we're actually the people with the expertise. So in 2009, we invited about a half dozen cities, a representative from half dozen cities to come to Portland, and we just talked about this. Nicole came. New York, Chicago, Boston, Minneapolis, Seattle, San Francisco. And out of that, we launched the Cities for Cycling initiative. As David said, we undertook the first work effort, which was to develop this urban bikeway design guide. And I'm actually proud of the accomplishment that we got it done. And we got it done quickly because, in part, we all understood that this was important. The need was there. Every city that we talked to echoed the same things, like, need this. That'll help. If we get this in place, that'll help the planners and engineers who are, they're sort of like the interested but concerned. They want to take a step forward, but they're not exactly sure where to put the foot down. So getting this done and getting this in place has helped us move that forward. So that's a little bit of my testimonial in terms of my history with this. So then let's go back to a little bit more of the Portland story. So how are we reaching those people? One of the things that we've done in terms of programs is we started this type of Cyclovia program. In Portland, we call it Sunday Parkways. So in neighborhoods around our city, we close streets for a Sunday morning and early afternoon, and totally close the streets, let walkers and bikes have control of the street. We set up circuits that vary in length from, about 7 to 10 miles. And we've grown that program from one event a year to 5 events a year, and we're drawing on average about 20,000 people per event. It's wildly popular in terms of the neighborhood participation in it.
How are you paying for those?
We pay for it. It's about a $500 million program, about 80% or 80 to 90% funded with donations, mostly from the healthcare industry. Is that 2 minutes, Davey? And with that, part of what we're seeing is that we are seeing a lot of signs that bicycle culture is alive and well in Portland. This scene here, where you see a sidewalk cafe, bikes parked in bike corrals next to them. We've got about 90 of these around Portland, all of them requested by the businesses. And it's one of the things that is sort of you don't need any storytelling. If I was to just show images of this, I think people get it. It's like people are using the bicycle as a part of everyday life. It's sort of good for business. It's activating the streetscape. It's bringing these spaces alive. And Portland has a lot of great sort of neighborhood Main Street environments like this. And it's helping us in terms of marketing. This is from Travel Portland, which is a nonprofit that markets our city. The caption there says, "Curbside parking available." So it's even being picked up in terms of how people view our city and view it in a positive way. So I know I'm running out of time. David, I'm going to go a few extra minutes here, but I'll blow through these slides so people get the rest of the story about Portland. So in terms of building out our network and what our strategy is, some key things: we're looking for a network that provides for safety, comfortness, it's attractive, direct, and cohesive. Those are all the things, the qualities that cyclists and people who are cycling want in a network. Our focus in the short term has been to focus on bicycle boulevards, or what we now call the neighborhood greenways. In part for us is we have a lot of the low-hanging fruit is there for us. We know from experience and from some research that we've done that these are popular, they're really cost-effective, and if done right, like we take care of high-quality crossing treatments, then they work well. We're also looking at major street improvements, like with the Cycletracks, probably investing less there, though, than some other cities are. So quickly, bicycle boulevards. The key design principle there is that you make the cyclist the priority user. And in Portland, we have a grid, our old part of the city, but most of the city was built on a grid. Streetcar development type neighborhoods, and from the early part of this century. Even though we're a West Coast city, the age of our city is really not that much different in terms of when the street system was built. So there's a lot of good connectivity and quite a lot of streets that are well adapted to this kind of environment. This is a neighborhood greenway. You can see that we use a lot of markings for wayfinding. We tell people where they're going. This is really important. That's part of the directness and the cohesiveness of the network. We find that people they're a lot more willing to go out and go on streets they haven't seen before because they don't drive them normally. And these are streets, unless your friend lives there, you might not go there. But these routes can work very well in terms of getting you from home to school, to park, to neighborhood business. A lot of the places that people want to go for short trips are well served by this kind of network. And in terms, some of the strategies are that we don't want these routes to turn into through routes for cars. So we do some traffic calming things to manage the volume of traffic that can use them. We've done a lot of speed management in Portland. At the same time we were growing our bikeway network, we were one of the cities that was leading in traffic calming. We started with traffic calming in the late 1980s. During that same time period, we were building up a network. We were also traffic calming a lot of streets. We built over 1,000 speed bumps in the city and with other traffic calming elements. So some of these streets that we're turning into neighborhood greenways are already streets that we've traffic calmed and have low volume, low speed traffic on them. We do things that, and some of them innovative, to try to improve crossings for cyclists at boulevards. This is a stormwater treatment where we basically pulled out and we move the cyclist forward, which is where you really want them so that they can see and be seen. Median crossing treatments on more major streets. Cyclists here can cross halfway and stop if they need to get a gap. Gives them a much more comfortable stopping point. The philosophy with designing major streets to make them more comfortable. This is a major corridor through our downtown. Today, some of it looks like this. It's a 5-foot or maybe 4.5-foot bike lane, a lot of car doors opening, a lot of activity, turning cars. It's not very comfortable. We're also seeing a lot of cyclists on some of our major corridors, and capacity is actually an issue when we're trying to get people through intersections and across some of our river crossings. So we're looking at Cycletracks. The idea, again, is we want a facility that provides more separation, is more comfortable. I think most of you know what it is. Here's a cycle track that we built recently. This could, with different materials, could be a lot like what your cultural trail is right here. So this is the bike space here, pedestrian space over here, and this is our aerial tram there in the background. So here's a project that we implemented recently. We took away a bike lane, a travel lane, flipped the position of the parked cars, very similar to what you'll see in Chicago. Put in treatments to help the cyclist make a left turn. Again, just an example. We built one raised cycle track. This is on a kind of a neighborhood collector street where we're reconstructing the street. Again, the bike position, not unlike your cultural trail. The sidewalk is closest to the property. We built this with concrete, and we have a lot of stormwater facilities incorporated in it. I think the project came out looking quite good, and we felt that as a part of a street reconstruction, it really didn't cost us any more. This sidewalk here for the engineers is basically, the Cycletracks basically built it at the sort of the standard of a sidewalk, so you didn't need to have as much road infrastructure, so to speak. I'm going to skip through these. So how do we get the space? We have this is sort of a short section of a two-way cycle track that we use kind of on a school route where we didn't want to put the kids into the street to mix. And in terms of improving intersections, we've put in quite a few bike boxes as a safety mitigation. One of the things, we've added an active warning sign at one place, so this sign actually has some movement to it. So when the light turns green and cyclists are going and cars are going, we actually have a detection in the pavement that tells cars when cyclists are coming and warns them that they could have a cyclist coming up abreast of them and tells them to yield to cyclists when they're turning. We've included elements of outreach and education, especially when we've done new projects like the bike boxes and the cycle tracks, trying to make sure that the drivers and cyclists understand how we want them to behave with these new types of facilities. We have one of the cities was early in terms of the implementation of bike signals. I know you're doing some of that here. And so finally, this is my parting slide. This is at the base of our aerial tram where we have basically full bike parking, and sort of the showcase of integrating our transit modes. We also have a streetcar line that runs basically just out of the picture right here. So I'll stop there and take any questions.
We'll kind of save questions till the end. Just real quick.
Will you just take a question?
Does anybody have any questions?
Have you seen an issue associated with when you put in your bike boxes having the vehicles actually stop where they're supposed to stop and not creep into the bike box?
I'll cover some more of that this afternoon. I try not to put too much technical stuff in here, but compliance with the stop bar has been good. And I think I think that the green, that's really the main value of the green, and branding it with the bike symbol in there. It's really, the bike box is really just an advanced stop bar. But motorists are very used to coming to a stop bar, then saying, I stop, okay, now I pull forward. But we don't want them to pull forward. We don't want them to turn right. It's no right turn on red. We want them to wait here. You'll see that symbol. So that's the main thing. And we're getting good compliance. I mean, well over 90% compliance with people stopping at that point and not pulling into the box. The other thing that's advantageous for us is we have a lot of cyclists at these intersections, so there's cyclists in the bike box. So cars are, I think, a lot less likely to pull into the bike box if they understand what the purpose of it is.
We talk a lot about bikes. I've been talking a lot about bikes in the last few months for some reason. Just a couple days ago, the CEOs for Cities, the livability series that they have going on, came to Indianapolis. They wanted me to talk about bikes and what we've done with bikes. And so I'll tell you guys a little bit about what we've done. How much have you gone over what we've done in the city?
General.
Yeah, General, we took them on a ride down to dinner on the cultural trail last night. So they got in town late.
You do know we had like a mile of bike lanes 5 years ago or whatever. So now we got over 75 and to connect up to hopefully 200 miles by 2015. And a couple of years ago we finally started connecting all these things up, which I think is good. So people can get from point A to point B pretty easily. And that was the key point because I read Mia Burke's book a while back, and how she wanted to make bike lanes and trails just a part of life as opposed to an exercise place or whatever. I love the fact that she would ride the bike in a dress with makeup. That's the part that stuck with me in that book, and how simple it was supposed to be for people. It's an alternate form of transportation as opposed to a bike, which is going to get you exercise and everything else. So I like that part of it. I did speak to the National Bike Summit a while back. I don't know if you saw that. Bicycling Magazine interviewed me during the National Bike Summit, which was a lot of fun, frankly. I'm not sure I like the title of the interview. The article is called "An Unlikely Hero." It was good. I mean, it was funny. And they did it all good, but I think the people in Indianapolis would know unlikely, would you? Maybe you would. Maybe it is good. You're right, and that's what the headline writers are for. To get you to read that. So that's been pretty good. But there's so many things that we've done on cycling. I'm assuming that you've been over the Bike Hub. We're going to go to the Bike Hub shortly, right?
Yeah, been there.
Been there. Okay. And the Culture Trail that goes along. I know you'll see that and talk about that. We're cutting the ribbon on that Friday, and I hope once I get off the plane.
We're going to wait on you.
Speed my way. The plane gets in at 3:40, and I'm supposed to be cutting at about 4:10. So hopefully I'll be there for that. We'll call you otherwise. But also there's other things that have been going on. The bike ride, the mayor's bike ride. You start with one first Saturday in June, and that's when it always is. That's the next one coming out. And we've kind of morphed into other things. The Spring Fever ride, we just had the second one of that. We had 500 to 600 people out there, something like that. That's the second year for that. And with the polar bear pedal just took off. It just took off. I mean, the second year, just under 1,000 people went out cold. And the first year we did it, the wind chill had to be below zero. The worst day of the year, snow, wind. I thought it was great. We're out there. We had 800 registered, but about 4,500 showed up. It was great. It was great. People enjoyed it.
Just a little background on that first one, by the way. It was about 2 weeks before Christmas, and I think I got put on speakerphone and heard the mayor saying, I want this bike, I want a bike ride in the winter, when it's cold and blowing. And I'm like, all right. He's like, we'll do it the first week of January. And so we whipped it together, and we had a pretty mild winter last year, and it was the one day that snowed,
it
was blustery, but people, there was nothing but smiles out.
It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, to say the least. And it was, God, it's just so funny. This year we had balmy weather. It's 25 degrees. It was nice out. Yeah. We also do it's a much smaller ride. Kind of Jameson kind of puts together a birthday ride. The problem is mine's in November, so it's kind of a cold ride too. We do little things here and there with people. I rode at my age though, when you do these things, it's okay. The 10 to 12 miles is fine. I rode 29 yesterday. And the problem is at my age, in the middle of the night, your leg cramps up and you're in pain at 2 a.m. and your wife's wondering what's going on here. But once again, that happened last night. Last week, though, I rode 33. I rode along 71st Street. So our farms connected. Our Monon Trail to the bike lanes on the northwest side of town, Margaret Road. was great. When you're in the bike lanes, I feel completely safe. When you're not in the bike lanes, it's a little hairy. We got to talk about 71st and 465 on the northwest side of town. The trucks get on 465. I felt safe until I got a truck around right here.
That's a little dicey.
A little dicey to that. But we'll figure that out. But so there's a lot that's going on. I don't know why. People seem to be surprised at what we're doing. We were behind as a city 5 years ago. Like I said, there was pretty much nothing. But if we're going to compete for talent, I'm very upfront about this. Not because I like to ride, it's because it's competition for talent. You guys are doing the right thing. You got to create the kind of city that people want to live in, and that's really what we're trying to do. Right? Trying to create that kind of city, and we will continue to create that kind of city. That's, some people don't like it. I always tell people that some people like it in 1950, some people don't like it in 2050. Prefer the 2050, frankly, and the 20-year-olds certainly prefer that too. One other point, and I'll take any questions you got. But it looks like I'm preaching to the choir meeting here. Marion University. You guys are aware of Marion University, the best bicycling team in the country, by far, not even close. And they're not in category, not in divisions like football, basketball. It's the best cycling school in the nation.
They just won nationals, I think.
Yes, they did, and they pretty much do that every year.
They actually are Division I.
Yeah. So they are terrific, and Dean Peterson out there has done a terrific job. And we had a park complex out there with the velodrome left over from the Pan Am Games in '87, but it was just deteriorating. We were maintaining it about $70,000 a year. I always talk about government doesn't have to own everything. It's about maximizing the use of the public asset. We couldn't do that. Marion University could do that, and they put $2 million. We leased it eventually about 2 years ago now. Mark, does that sound right? Or 2 years ago? They put $2 million in infrastructure into it. They now do BMX, cyclocross. They will have criterium racing out there, and of course the velodrome racing. It's just a very active place, and they're continue to build on that. There may be really some dramatic things that are going to happen in the next couple of 3 years out there, which might make it one of the best 2 or 3 cycling areas, venues in the nation. It's going to be rather dramatic. Dean's a great guy that's out there. So there's just so much happening, and I think we're positioning ourselves well. I'm just doing what I think is right, as these guys all know. But when we went to the National Bike Summit, I had no idea that Indianapolis was thought of in that way. So I appreciate the fact that so many people in the city kind of going to BGI. It really propelled the city forward on cycling. So it's very important to us. And people are going to have to bring me back in a little bit, because somebody in here did not tell me no about the racing. The race with the mayor, the Indy Crit. We have 3 crits downtown. The Mass Ave Crit, pretty well known. The Indy Crit, 3 or 4 years old, and the Fountain Square Crit, which is now its 2nd year. So the Indy Crit folks came up to me and they wanted to have a race with the mayor. I was trying to get into racing again. Because I'm never going to be Cat 1 or Cat 2, but I think I can get to the bottom end of Cat 5 somewhere. And I was going to do that last year. I got my knee hurt. I couldn't do that, so I was going to do it this year. They asked me, no, why don't we do this? So I got a race with the mayor with all 4 TV stations and newspapers and radio people, and so we're going to have at least two very, very good riders will be in there, and their job is to protect me. And not beat me. So we're going to do that, and that'll get a lot of visibility for the city, frankly, because it was designed to get the media involved in the race. A lot of the media do ride bikes around here, but I think I have a little fun. I haven't been in a pack in 74. What's that? 39 years? 49 years. 39 years. The little.
She was asking about the little 5 last one.
About the little 5?
Yeah.
The little 5 that
I know.
you raced? Yeah,
Absolutely,
I was
yeah.
in that for a couple of years, and I haven't been in a pack in 39 years, and so we'll see. Like I said, their job is to protect me. So I don't go down. But it'll be fun. But I think it gives a lot more visibility in the city, and we have some things going up. I'm sure we're going to talk about 2 wheels in the city coming up too this Saturday. Just a lot of things. A lot of things are going on in the city that hadn't gone on before. Trying to create that kind of city that people want to live in. That's really what we're trying to do. That's what I wanted to come tell you. You got any questions? And you guys too.
thank you for having me. I think Chicago's in a really unique position right now, and actually listening to the presentations and hearing what's going on in Indianapolis, it's incredible how similar we are. How similar we are to every other city here right now. I think Indianapolis and Chicago, we have incredible political leadership from the top. So I'll talk about that a little bit, and that's really what's driving what we're doing in Chicago, no doubt about it. And it's actually percolating, and I'm not sure how this is in Indianapolis, but it's percolating amongst the neighborhoods, amongst our aldermen, and I'll talk about that and how important that is. I'm going to start by talking about how poor Chicago was just 2 years ago in terms of infrastructure and how little we were doing. So it ties a little bit into Boston and how we've definitely moved ahead over the last few years. Portland, we have neighborhoods in Chicago where you have 15% of trips by bike. 10% of people in these neighborhoods are riding their bikes to work. Those pictures in Portland, we have neighborhoods like that look exactly like that. We're a big city. Similar to New York City, we have very diverse neighborhoods. But we're doing a lot. We've come back to the forefront. And I guess our tie into New York City is that's our competition. We're always trying to compete with New York City and surpass what they're doing. So it's good to have New York kind of lead the way. So it's a great time to be in Indianapolis. I was incredibly impressed in what we saw last night, and I can't wait to see more. So a little bit about Chicago. Prior to 2011, that's kind of how I break down our history of bikes. Early 2000s, we were named the best big city for bicycling in the country. Quite an honor. Huge city, a lot of traffic, a lot of congestion. We were putting in bike lanes. We were putting in marked shared lanes. Actually, we were one of the first cities to put in marked shared lanes, and that was quite the feat at the time. But this is what we were doing. We were putting in a 5-foot bike lane, and this is a very industrial street. You have the Morton Salt Company there. You have truck traffic. That's what we were doing. Our focus was on bike lanes. We had 0.5% of our trips to work were by bike in 2000. That's gone up to, that's the typo there, 1.3%. So it's more than doubled over the decade of 2000 to 2010. But we realized that it's really not enough, and we weren't really developing a network. We didn't really have a plan to go forward. We were just doing things, kind of the low-hanging fruit. What could we get in, and what could we get in easily? So this photo on the left, which isn't showing up too well here, I apologize. Basically, we were giving bikes leftover space. This is one of the few streets in the city, just south of the Loop. One of the few streets in the city where the speed limit's not 30 miles per hour or less. It's actually a 40-mile-per-hour roadway, 45,000 cars a day. We squeezed in a 4-foot bike lane between a moving motor vehicle lane and a bus lane. Not going to attract that target market that Rob was talking about. And oftentimes we just simply ignored bicycle accommodations or bicyclist needs, especially in the parts of the city where we needed it most. Up until 2011, we did not have one single bike lane in our central business district in the Loop. And that's where most people were riding, is to get to work, to get downtown. So there really wasn't that political push. We didn't have the support to actually do things. In order to do things downtown, there wasn't the space. We had to take away from motorists or motor vehicle parking or travel, and we just didn't have the will to do that. We realized that it quickly became a problem. We have, I think Nicole said 5 fatalities this past year. We have, on average, 8 to 10 bicycle fatalities a year, which is way too many. Our goal is 0 bicycle fatalities. But with the infrastructure we were providing, it really wasn't as safe as it could be and as good as it could be. So these headlines were all too common. We realized that it wasn't just bicycling. We had a public safety problem. If Rob was just mentioning on the way over here, we have a lot of taxis. We have a lot of traffic, high-speed traffic. We wanted to slow things down. We had a complete streets policy. It really wasn't being enforced. It really wasn't being followed. Some incredible crash statistics here, incredible in a bad way. 130,000 crashes a day, or a year. There's about 350 crashes a day that are happening out there. Our bike and pedestrian crashes, most of those crashes resulted in injuries. So we realized that we really needed to kind of reimagine our streets and make it safer for everybody out there. So that was prior to 2011. It all changed almost 2 years ago to the day, middle of May 2011. New administration came in. Former Mayor Daley was in office for 22 years. Similar to Boston again. Initially, he was very supportive of bicycling. He did some good things, but it kind of leveled off. There wasn't much support towards the end of his tenure. when Ron came into office, he really put a focus on not only bicycling, but street safety in general, trying to make our streets as safe as possible for all users, and kind of tying it back into the complete streets component. The first thing he did, he brought in Commissioner Gabe Klein, who's on the left there in the black shirt. Gabe was in the former Director of Transportation in D.C., launched Capital Bike Share, was responsible for several of their pretty innovative, high-profile bike projects that went in along Pennsylvania Avenue, for example, and really created this culture of support, culture of innovation, and really pushing people to do great things. The mayor put together a transition report when he came into office. It outlined 30 to 40 strategies dealing with everything from economic development, health, transportation as well. And the interesting part of it was the main focus of the transportation chapter really dealt with bicycling. It talked about making our streets safer for cycling. The one bullet point that you still hear about 2 years later in the media, from advocacy groups, et cetera, is building 100 miles of protected bike lanes by 2015. In a four-year period, building 100 miles. And it's amazing that it's stuck 2 years later, and we hear about that almost every day still. And basically what that means is building bikeways that are comfortable for people of all ages and all abilities. Rob described the 4 types of cyclists down here, which we use all the time. It's a great survey. Basically, how I like to explain it is bike lanes, marked shared lanes, they have their place. And I'll talk a little bit about that this afternoon. But that's really going after kind of that smaller percent of enthused and confident folks. In order to reach that large portion of our population, the interested but concerned group, we need to go beyond bike lanes. We need to create infrastructure that is really accommodating. You feel safe, you feel comfortable, and it's enjoying to ride in these lanes, and that's really where we want to go. So the focus has kind of gone from moving motor vehicle traffic to people, bicyclists, pedestrians, making our streets safer, more livable, more enjoyable to be at. So what have we done over a 2-year period? Prior to May 2011, we had 140 miles of bike lanes in the city, just typical bike lanes and marked shared lanes. In 2000, we had about 90 miles, so for that 10-year period, we put in another 50. So 5 miles a year, not doing much over that first decade of the 2000s. 2 years later, we put in 60 new miles of bikeways in a 2-year period. 12 miles of those being Cycletracks, 18 miles of those being buffered bike lanes. And unlike what you guys are doing here with the Cultural Trail, which is an amazing facility, it's expensive to do that, but it looks fantastic. We've been focusing on how do we get things in quickly and how do we get things in cheaply. We don't have a lot of money to be doing this. We have federal funding that's coming online just now, but for the first 2 years, we really had to get creative and really make sure we were managing our resources and doing as much as we could with very little money. So we've been using paint, flex posts, some colored pavement. We've been able to put in those 60 miles for just about $5 million over a 2-year period. Before that, we didn't get any city money, so even to get that $5 million of local money was a huge accomplishment. It really shows that coming from the top, it wasn't just the Department of Transportation who's believing in this. It's really going throughout all the departments in the city. We've also created, the first 2 years that we were doing this, we didn't have a plan. We didn't, when Ron came into office, we had one to two people working in the bike program. We had no plan. We had no money. We hit the ground running. The photo on the top right here, this is Kinsey Street. May 15th, when the mayor came in office, he said, I want a cycle track in place by Bike to Work Day, which in Chicago was June 15th. So we really didn't know what we were doing at the time. Thankfully, the NACDO guide and expertise from around the country kind of led us to actually get this in 1 month's period, which was great at the time. Looking back, we definitely missed some things. We didn't do any outreach. I wouldn't recommend it, but it was really cool to see. That, actually, funny story, this is the Boulevards chocolate factory right here. If you're ever in Chicago and you smell chocolate, it's coming from this factory. We were out here, actually, the Friday before we were going to strike on Monday. We went door to door and said, hey, we're doing this on Monday, just so you guys know. Friday afternoon, not many people are around, so we missed several businesses, several residents. We got out here Monday morning, started striping. You guys came running out. They have trucks that pull up to the curb and connect directly into the building with hoses to get the materials in for their chocolate. And they said, you can't take this curbside. We need to pull up. So we, on the street, changed our design in pen and gave it to the contractor, and they striped it. So we had to go back to just a buffered bike lane for that half-block stretch. But it was really cool to be a part of it. Really cool to see that support and that demand to do that so quickly.
I think that while we have the mayor here, we should kind of segue into discussion, and then a lot of the technical stuff we can cover in the afternoon.
Great. You want to open it up for discussion?
Sure. I think that now that we've had a chance to kind of hear from all three cities and at least in part from Chicago, it would be great to kind of engage the city officials in discussion and sort of figure out what it is that you'd like to sort of learn from Boston, Portland, Chicago, and what key questions that you have for the city of Indianapolis, and how what they've sort of presented this morning can inform your next steps.
Always interested in financing, innovative financing, grants, things we might not have thought of to allocate for things like this.
I would be interested in just knowing how your metropolitan planning organization supported your efforts and what they were doing kind of a regional effort, if they were or weren't.
I'd be happy to take that question. Our NPO, which in Portland is called Metro, has a long history of being technically, I think, a good transportation planning agency, a strong connection between land use and transportation planning. We've long had sort of a regional vision of connected land use and transportation outcomes. And so one of the things our regional planning agency has done is for funds that come through the region, they have basically set aside a pot that would fund active transportation. So the flexible monies that we are getting at the regional level, there's a pot of money that we're able to compete for that's essentially earmarked for active transportation. So that in part answers your question. That's largely where we're going to get our money over the next 5 years to do the larger projects. I'm talking about projects that would probably be in that $1 to $3 million range. Those will largely be funded with those federal regional dollars that are coming through our regional agency. So there's a good I think there's a good synergy there between the city's vision of the future and our MPO's vision of the future. There's always that balancing that goes on with we don't have a unigov, so to speak. So there's our more suburban parts of the region. They want some of the they want some of theirs too, but they're competing for money in that same category as well. They might be building more trail-like facilities or multi-use facilities in some contexts. We're going to be probably using that money more for strictly on-street facilities and even building out more of our network. So it's not necessarily sort of those big signature projects, but we might be building out a portion of an area of the city to complete our neighborhood greenway network, for instance.
I have another one. I don't want to hog over time. You all have robust transit systems. We don't. But how do you coordinate with the transit agencies, and are you using your bike plans to maybe complete connectivity from key destinations, things like that?
Yeah, there's good dialogue and connectivity. I mean, synergy between our transit agency, which really is regional, Metro, and our city. We're working quite a bit with our transit agency called TriMet on sort of those last mile issues. We really see active transportation as an extension of transit. We know that we need to get people to transit in order for transit to be successful. And I really see bike share. I've been talking up the idea that bike share, ultimately, when we're trying to get it funded now, but ultimately I see the vision that bike share should be in the transit portfolio because it's a part of a transit system.
I can answer too. For bike share, we had a big grant, $3.1 million from Bus to the Village Grant, FTA. So when we added stations, they were tightly connected to transit hubs. 2 of our top 5 busiest stations are the main commuter hubs, North Station and South Station. 39 in a survey requesting, did you combine hub with any other modes of transportation? 39% said public transportation. to me, it's a lot more effective than buses or bikes on transit. And then we asked subway users typically how they commute or get around. 41% of their trips are by public transport. Not necessarily by, these guys are active public transport users. 21% do their non-commute trips by transit. So one, you've got a user group that's very public transit friendly, and two, the trips work very well with public transit.
And as you know, areas that are, low to modest density, how do you serve them with transit is a big problem. So, if you can integrate like bike share with that, then that last mile problem can be, well, it's the last 3 miles. And that area that you can serve effectively grows a lot.
Yeah, we actually, when we developed our bike plan, so we have transit stations, train stations at least, that are 15 miles from downtown that are still within the city. We realize that it's not realistic to expect people who live in those neighborhoods to necessarily bike to work all the time. So we really try to build almost little networks, bike networks, around these transit hubs where people can ride their bike to the train and then take the train downtown for work. We're working pretty closely with the CTA on bike share. Chicago's transit system, there's spokes, so they radiate out from downtown. It's really difficult to get east-west or on the west side north-south to connect to different rail lines. So bike share is going to be a game changer. You'll really be able to get to all these different rail lines that they're really only a mile or two apart, but it takes a half an hour or 40 minutes to get there on the bus. So to be able to have bike share to connect them is really going to be great.
Question that dovetails on that a little bit. When you're talking about the transit network planning a little bit, every city in the room is starting to get a pretty robust bike network as well that's pretty diversified between Cycletracks and protected lanes and on-street bike lanes. And is there thinking now that you're going to have to start planning your bicycle network? If so, we all have limited resources. How are you going to prioritize funding? Is it always get the most dedicated lane that you possibly can in every given instance? Or is there a way that you're looking at prioritizing your funding so you can get the most bang for your buck out of the right kind of investment in bikes?
For us, on the cycle tracks, we wait for reconstruction, and maybe we try to, we'll piggyback off existing reconstruction. We might try to get in the queue or push something up the queue for when we do an off-street cycle track or sidewalk level. Paint is relatively cheap, so we can do anything with paint anytime. So we prioritize by the number one, demand, number two, safety, number three, geographic distribution, number four, and these aren't in order, network connectivity.
I just want to make sure before you go, you need to go on how they're also going through the dangerous areas. They already built up dangerous areas. So there are a few of them. I was in one the other day. But how do they manage to do that? When you're going east, west, north, south, whatever, you come to a place that's already there. You got to actually do lanes or colors or nobody might do.
I'm going to, for the sake of our delegation, I'm going to make a pitch to the mayor and thank him before he leaves. But I want to say your leadership is really important, not just for Indianapolis, but at a national level. I mean, it's really important. I'm going to go back and tell people this is what Mayor Ballard said. This is what Indianapolis is doing. He's on your wheel. We got to look out. But seriously, I think you're going to find yourself put in more and more people are going to be asking you to speak at national bike summits and other forums, because I think that the message that you've got the right message here, and it really helps. As I said in my early talk, that the leadership really has to come from us. I mean, we're the ones who are going to make a difference in the changes, and that political leadership is so critical to it. So I want to thank you for that leadership. Thank you.
On that note, let me get out of here. Okay?
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
I'll be up in Boston a couple weekends.
Oh, okay.
My daughter's at the Cubs.
Oh, what's your
She's
job?
graduating. Graduation.
Thank you.
Do you like
Thank you
visit
so
or
much.
do you like bike share?
Thank you very much.
Won't be there that long. But,
If you want to raise me, you know that.
Oh, yeah.
Right up for you.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Why is that open and pedal on my bike?
All right. That's good. I appreciate it. It's great seeing you. Get all of you. I appreciate all your help. Appreciate you helping us out, getting this better. So, is that all kind of works? So. Thanks, guys.
So I think if everybody's okay with it, we can continue with the Q&A and going with the discussion. Sounds good.
Do you want me to finish up mine, or no? It's not. I guess it's.
We have about 5 minutes.
Okay, we'll do Q&A. That's fine.
You've got some pretty good information on the Make Life House.
I was mostly going to talk about the political support now, the aldermanic support. Chicago's unique. We have 50 wards, so pretty much 50 different cities. We have aldermen now. It's one of the funding questions. We have aldermen now, so every alderman gets $1.3 million for infrastructure projects in their ward, which sounds like a lot, but when you have 70,000 people in your ward, it's really you're managing a small city.
So you just divided up equally amongst them,
Correct.
and you let them prioritize?
They get to prioritize it. But what's been happening, we have so many newer aldermen now who really get kind of non-motorized transportation and the livability component of it. They're actually funding a lot of our bike projects, which is really cool to see. Some wards have actually implemented participatory budgeting, where they let the residents actually vote on what gets funded. And every time it's happened so far, it's been going on for about 2 years. Every time a bike project or a pedestrian project ends up being number one. So really cool to see kind of infiltrating throughout the aldermen. We've had 10 aldermen now go to Europe on some of these study tours, and it's amazing to see them come back. And it's almost, with 10 now who have gone, it's becoming difficult on us because they're all asking us to do only things in their ward, which is a great problem to have. I don't know if touch on the funding question. I'll just put this slide up there. I think it's funny because I think it's great to have competition among cities and mayors really trying to one-up each other. Ron, at our press conference for our Dearborn Bike Lane project, he called out Seattle. And just, I think this past week in the city address in Seattle, the state of the city, Mayor McKeon kind of rebutted him. I think we have a little healthy competition going on now, so it's good.
Mike, that kind of brings up the question around sort of messaging, and I know that that was something that we talked a little bit about last night, but can you talk a little bit about how some of the challenges that Chicago has had around sort of messaging bike and sort of more broadly bike and ped projects?
Sure. Yeah, Chicago, it's a pretty unique city. It's a huge city, the third biggest city in the country, incredibly dense in some areas, but it's a Midwestern city. Most people drive. Most people who move to Chicago come from the Midwest. I came from Milwaukee. When I moved, I brought a car. And I think most people who move to Chicago bring a car. So there's still a lot of driving going on. Obviously, our streets are incredibly congested, so there's still this mindset that people want to drive. So we've had to really pick and choose where we do our projects initially. We want to make sure that we're picking winning projects that aren't going to backfire. We actually had one backfire last year, and it was not fun at all. So really working with our advocacy group a lot. They've done a great job of kind of messaging our projects and really kind of trying to work throughout the city in neighborhoods that there may not be a lot of people riding bikes right now, really trying to promote the benefits beyond just riding a bike. They've also done a great job of getting business support. It's been incredible to see Motorola Mobility, which is obviously a huge corporation, move back downtown. When they did that, they cited Kinsey Bike Lanes in their press release. Don Wilson, ERW Trading Group, kind of a local startup, multi-million-dollar corporation now, huge bike advocate. He's always promoting our projects. And then even small businesses, which I think is our most important stakeholder, they just recently released an op-ed in Sun-Times talking about the benefits of one of our proposed projects that has been going through some struggles with the neighborhood. So our advocacy group has really done a great job kind of feeding information, really educating folks on the benefits of these projects and how it is really a city benefit, a livability benefit. It's not just about trying to accommodate, the crazy cyclists who may be riding down the street. It's really trying to create a sense of place. We've been pretty lucky with very little backlash in the media so far.
I'll take a quick stab at that funding and priority question. We've struggled with that somewhat. After we completed our bike plan, we had a really good plan for building out our network, but we didn't have a short-term strategy necessarily for what to go first. And so since we've put that bike plan in place, we're trying now to be more clearly articulate what our short-term strategy is. Some of it is opportunistic. We're looking for where there's opportunity and where we've got you might say where we've got support. So sometimes it's the stakeholder support we need from local businesses, et cetera. So I think that's helpful that if you do have a strategy. But as one of the slides that I put up for Portland, I mean, we do have certainly a strategy that's focusing more on the cost-effective, basically high rate of return investments that we're making in our neighborhood greenway network. So that'll give us the ability to, build out the completeness of our network, serve more populations, serve more of our neighborhoods, and it helps, I think, address what the issue that the mayor said is like, well, what about these hard places? We may not have our ultimate treatment out there. Ultimately, that major road's going to need a cycle track or a buffer bike lane. It's going to involve, maybe some heavy lift in terms of removing a travel lane, removing parking. But if we can put the neighborhood greenway in place that gives you a reasonable alternative to being on that street, it's running 3 blocks off of it, but runs largely parallel, serves almost all the same destinations, has destination signing that will take cyclists from the neighborhood greenway route to a commercial center that's on the major streets. So the distance they would actually have to be on the major street to get where they want to go might be a block instead of 10 blocks. That's for us is sort of that interim strategy that'll get us where we want to be eventually. And part of what I think is interesting for me to see, because I've been in Portland long enough, as a young traffic engineer, if you told me that traffic volumes would go down on some of these major streets, I would say, ain't gonna happen. They'll always grow. That's not the reality. We have literally peaked. We are going the other direction. I can, part of the glory of being a traffic engineer is I can look at those traffic volumes and go, you know what? We can take a lane up there. Let's go. I've got the power to do that. So, more and more, sort of incrementally, we can see that, maybe this is, mode shift is actually working. We can start to go a little bit more, we can go a little further.
I have an outreach kind of messaging question regarding the bicycle boulevards. The intersection treatments where you do volume management, left turns onto neighborhood streets. How have you been effective in implementing those? Where you limit turn, where you actually eliminate turns on those network streets?
Well, a couple things. There's the sort of hard diversion, which is something physically keeps you from making the movement. There's soft diversion where we do things that's like, well, you could go that way, but it's not very attractive. You got to go over a lot of speed bumps, and you might have to go around some chicanes and other things. Generally, we're very strategic in picking these routes. We try to pick routes in general that don't have very much volume on them to start with. So really all we're doing is sort of maintaining those low volumes that are there when we implement it. And so the only people who oftentimes are inconvenienced by those turning restrictions are some local residents that need to get into that segment of the street for access to their homes. And so doing the outreach that we do, every project has a public involvement phase where we're meeting with those local residents, meeting with them early on to talk about the design concepts, hear their concerns. We adapt the design sometimes. I mean, we might have proposed one location for a semi-diverter. We might move that to another location where it's more agreeable. And there's also a package of benefits that they see. They get a traffic calm street. They get street trees put in. There might be amenities in terms of like rain gardens and stormwater swale treatments that go in. So they see both sides of that, and usually it's not too hard to sell. Oftentimes the hardest thing is just getting our fire bureau to agree with the design concepts that we have and adapting the design so that their access is still accommodated.
Are some of those intersections mountable, like a road curb?
Sometimes there's sort of cutouts or mountable elements that fire engines can use. And one of the, I won't go into great detail, but one of the problems we have in Portland is that our fire rolls with their fire truck on every 911 call. So shortness of a breath is, engine number 9 roll into the neighborhood. And it's like, wow, do we really need to have these great big trucks, rolling on all these things? But there's a whole bunch of union issues and other things. But our new mayor and actually our leadership, they're starting to push back a little bit on that, starting to get some more rational response to that.
So I don't want to stop conversation, but out of respect for people's schedules, we were scheduled till 11. So people can hang around here for a little bit. I don't think there's anything coming in this room right afterwards. Probably most of us will be going over to the city market for lunch, and then we'll be going down to Madison, so they can give all the project and construction managers kind of the tech talk, a different talk than this. So, but I just want to say I just wanted to thank everybody for being here. It's kind of interesting that infographic, or that it was shown in 2 different versions, but the same information about that interested but concerned and really how we design our bikeways. That's really kind of taken a much more, I really started to embrace that a lot more and look at it in a different light. Some of you know I've got a 3-week-old child at home. And so I'm thinking as I live in the city and want to raise my child in the city that, I want to make sure I'm designing these bikeways that I'm going to feel comfortable, riding on with my son. So I think, I don't know, this is just a little bit of my personal reflection on what we have. I think we are extremely lucky, and I think some of the national guests, after seeing the Cultural Trail, and then other cities, the Cultural Trail really is a destination downtown. So we have a bike head destination downtown that you can really connect with the majority, or within a few blocks, the majority of our attractions or businesses in our downtown district. And so I think Fountain Square and the cycle track we put in there was a really telling project, and how we are really trying to get as many people as we can, especially that interested but concerned group, to the Cultural Trail. And then they've got, as soon as you get to the Cultural Trail, you've basically got 8 miles of protected. I've taken an 8-year-old all along the Cultural Trail and felt pretty safe the whole time. So I think that's something very unique that we have, and I consider it my job to really make sure that we utilize that. And